We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners at Burke Britton Financial Partners. This is episode number 99 of the Finances podcast. Can you believe that, Amy?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Cindy, can you believe that? You've edited and posted nearly half of them, I think.
Oh, it's a lot.
It is a lot. And
100's going to be good.
It's going to be good. We were going to do it today, but we ran out of time. So I'm sorry, Steve. I haven't introduced you yet, but today's guest is Stephen Smith. Stephen is Director of Psychological Services at Prova Profiling. Steve, thanks for coming all the way down from Canberra today. We know you like driving, but we've got to get you out of here at a reasonable time too, because you've got to head across to Adelaide Way. So thanks for coming on, mate. When we had you down last time, bit of context before I get you to do a little bit of an intro of yourself. We had you down about a month ago, I think, was it, Amy? Yeah. And we did some personality profiling for our team, which was, I think, one of the most well-received exercises we've done as a group. Everyone loved it. It was pretty insightful when we start to put some of the sort of personality qualities against the individuals that work in and around the business. But whenever I think about sort of both personality profiling, I straight away go to like criminal profiling and think, is that the dominant use of sort of psychological profiling? But you operated in and around sort of the A&P circles, which is where we cross paths. But maybe if we go back a little bit, talk about a little bit about your background in sort of psychology, how you got into the field, leading up to what you're doing today, or have done for nearly 20 years with Prova Profiling.
Yeah, sure. So my background is I'm a psychologist. I started my career going on 40 years ago now in the Navy as a Navy recruitment psychologist. So we profiled people back then to work out where they best fit within the Navy. Once they then joined the Navy, we then reprofiled them to make sure we got the right teams together. Because as with the Navy, you're out in submarines for 6 months at a time, 12 months at a time. You really had to get the right mix of people to basically for the whole thing to work. So that's where it all started. Then I was over in Stirling Port over in Perth, and I met Paul Keating, the Prime Minister at the time, and he was starting the job training programs, which was getting people off unemployment benefits and putting them in training programs. And we got talking one night about profiling, and I suggested that, well, why don't you profile them first to make sure you're matching the right person to the right job, and then also profiling the employer to make sure that the employee and the employer were also a good match. So that's where all started. I did that for a few years, and then I decided to go back into real proper psychology, which was clinical psychology. So I went back into clinical psychology for quite a few years. And even through the clinical, I still profile people because, for example, I did marriage counselling for a bit. And even in a marriage, you've got two different types of people. So the first thing I'd suggest is that they did profiling to see if, A, they were compatible, and not that they should then do anything about it, but how just to kind of make their relationship work better because they're a bit more aware of each other. Then I got into recruitment. I decided to have a break completely from psychology, and I started up a recruitment company. Again, all based around profiling, getting the right people with the right jobs. I missed psychology after about 2 years. So I went back to psychology and opened up another psychology firm called Prova Profiling. At that stage, I was working with A&P. And so we were talking back in 15 years ago when they started the Horizons program. And the first thing we did was start profiling the people joining the Horizons program. But to do that, what we did is we profiled many of the successful A&P practices, particularly the directors and the successful advisors, and try to work out what type of profile was the best fit for a practice manager, for a salesperson, for a financial advisor, for a paraplanner, for admin, CSO, etc. We did that. We then ran through all the Horizons people. We then went on and did A&P financial planning full stop. At the same time, we were working with Charter, AXA and Hillross separately before A&P took them all over. And then it kind of just become one big happy family. And so we've been doing that for about 15 years now. So that's where the profiling started.
I wanted to dive straight into...
Questions?
No, I was going to dive straight into what is you said the ideal practice principle.
Yeah.
Ideal practice principle profile. So what is it? So is Peter the ideal practice principal founder of a business? What do they look like?
Well, there's a lot of answers to that. A lot of the answers is where the practice is at, where they want to go, where they are they country or are they mainstream city? Is mainstream city Sydney and Melbourne different from mainstream Brisbane and Adelaide? Yes, it is. So the first thing we do is actually profile the practice itself, profile the where they are at, what they're looking at, where they are in their stage of development, and then the profiling works. So basically the answer to that is
It depends.
it depends.
It depends on the goals and where the business is going.
It is.
Yeah.
But the big difference is the knowledge of the profile. So although they're all different, it's that knowledge. So Peter, you said earlier, what is profiling? You thought it was more, mainly for criminal. We do some criminal work, particularly narcissist sociopaths. Very dangerous type of people. Let's not go that way. But we all profile people all day, every day. Every time you meet someone, every time you talk to someone, every time you go to a barbecue, you go to a friend's place, you go out for dinner, you meet new people. Every single time you profile them. And that's what we do.
Is profiling also, is profiling what people would normally call judgment?
What we do is research has shown that we make decisions about each other within about 4 minutes of meeting each other. And that's based on so many factors, but most of it's innate and psychological. But so as soon as we see somebody, we put them in little boxes of past experience and who we think they are, what they are. And once we form that impression, it's almost impossible to change.
So what's the basis of that? Is that societal influences or is it evolutionary influences that force us to sort of judge? And
It's a bit of everything. It's who we are. So it's our emotional intelligence. So it's basically on how we perceive ourselves, how we perceive the world, how other people affect us, how we affect them. And because that's such a complex scenario, as soon as we meet people, we profile them and we analyse them. And everybody out there listening to this, you think about every time you've met somebody for the first time, automatically within a few minutes, you make some big impressions about them. Sometimes you like them, sometimes you don't. Sometimes whatever it is, but it's really interesting that if in the first 4 minutes you like someone or you feel like an attraction to them or warmth or some form of enthusiasm, you then allow that like to extend. So you give them a lot of leeway to, I want to get to know you better. And then you pick out all the nice characteristics of the person to make it work. But if on the other hand, in the first 4 minutes you think this person's a bit of a turkey, well, that's a psychological term for someone that is a bit of a turkey, you automatically concentrate on their negatives. So every time they open their mouth or do something, you think about how negative it is rather than how positive it is. So all what we do at Prova is turn that into science. Psychology's been a science now for 200 years, and a lot of it's based on research and a lot of facts and a lot of historical data and a lot of norms and everything else. So we take what we see and we now put it into a profile. So what we bring to light through the profiling is what we think about each other, but we put words behind it. So if I asked you to describe people you've met, tell me about them, you'd struggle. You'd say, I feel this or I think that, but you really haven't got any basis for it. So what the profiling does is give you the terminology and it brings forth to your conscious brain what you're actually seeing. And then once you actually are conscious of it, then you become aware of why it's affecting you in a certain way or how you're affecting that person in a certain way. And thus, that's what's used for recruitment and working within businesses.
Do you think, I was just going to ask, what do you think is more important, the profiling that you do of the people around you or your own profile or a combination? Oh, that's a good question.
Yep. So anytime when we did Burke Britain, for example, the first thing we did was everybody within Burke Britain had to do their own profile because awareness starts with yourself. Basically, emotional intelligence is understanding who you are, understanding who other people are, understanding how they're affecting you, and understanding how you're affecting them, and then putting it all together. So the first step in a profiling exercise or a good understanding of other people or yourself is understanding yourself. If you can't understand yourself and work out who you are, you can't start on other people.
I feel like that really comes back to the quote, if you can't love yourself, how are you going to love someone else? It's kind of the same principle, to look within, to look without kind of thing. Yeah.
And most emotionally unintelligent people we meet are typically the people that have no understanding on how they're affecting other people.
Mm-hmm.
And they're the people that have not spent time learning about themselves, accepting who they are and understanding who they are personally. And that's where it all starts.
Yeah, I'd say that's true.
You talked about the profiling that we did, and one of the things that we did was this DISC behavioural profiling. Can you maybe talk to the genesis of that? Is that something that is your creation, or is it the culmination of all those 200 years worth of psychology studies? And
Well, actually, profiling goes back to the beginning of time. That's where profiling started. If you go through history, they all talk about the different types of people, and they usually talk about 4 different types of people. Right back 2,000 years ago when they first started describing people, it was in 4 types. Carl Jungian started looking at it and putting people into 4 quadrants in the Carl Jungian personality theories. Over time, many psychologists and other people did then developed all those theories and created their own, such as the Myers-Briggs, the HBDI. There's many of them that you'll find on the internet. But they're all based on exactly the same thing, that there's 4 major quadrants, and there's the dominance, the influencing, steadiness, and conscientiousness, which we'll come back to. And then what happened in about the 40s and 50s, Professor William Marston decided to make it public. So he released the DISC. And he put the DISC online for free, so therefore the DISC became free to use and free to develop. So nearly every single personality test that you'll ever do has got a DISC basis to it, which is based on the Carl Jung theory. They call it different things. The others are the Myers-Briggs, the HBDI, and a couple of others. They've made it theirs unique, but at the end of the day, it's still based on quadrants of personality.
you mentioned them quickly, but let's go back through those 4 quadrants. I think very interesting. There's a lot of talk amongst the team here. Created lots of conversation around the sort of types of personalities that we had, and also some of the influences that maybe created those characteristics. What are they exactly?
Well, let's start where it starts. Our personality is basically every single thing about us. Every single thing. It's our values, our beliefs. It's what we laugh at, it's what we cry at, it's who we are, it's how we present to the world, it's our values, it's our morals. It's basically everything. Research suggests that our personality is basically the way it is by about the age of 8, 9 or 10. So if you've got kids at that age group, well, that's what they're going to be like forever. So our personality is formed up to the age of about 8, right from in the womb, right through till we get 8, 9 and 10. And it's based on a variety of factors, both genetic, obviously from our parents, but also then the social influences of our family, our parents and our upbringing. So we end up in this accumulation of experiences and who we are. Then by the age of 8, 9 or 10, we start developing an external personality, which is the way we like to present to the world. But at the end of the day, our internal personality doesn't change a lot. So we can be anybody we like at any time, but we do have a like who we really are, and that's our real personality.
Baked in.
It's there.
It's so interesting, I find, though, but that internal personality that you develop at such a young age, like you said, up until 9, it'll be probably about like the same, that people in the same household can come out, even though they've had the same parents and very similar experiences, same school, they can end up being very different people. I know plenty of families whose siblings are very different, juxtaposing personalities. So it's interesting to see, even though the situational and biological factors are pretty similar, that you can end up with such a different personality. Do you know why that is?
Yeah, because we've got a mixture of genes. So if you mix a whole stack of genes together, they'll never be all the same. So although you're genetically born to the same parents, you're going to have a potentially completely different genetic makeup.
Oh.
So you start with a different genetic makeup, and then even if you've got identical twins, they do not share the same world or the same experiences, because one's a fraction older, one's a fraction younger. One will be more confident than the other, one will be less confident, one will be... Everything will be different. So although people can think, but they brought up in the same household, they see the world differently. Because the reason why they see the world differently is because the genetics on who we are, we determine what we see in the world. So all of us, there's 4 in this group at the moment. If we were looking out the window and there was a car accident, all 4 of us would describe it completely different, because we're viewing the world from our own eyes, and that's the same with how we become who we are. And just on that, it's really interesting that if you talk to parents with multiple kids, like I've got 3 children, their little personalities start right from almost birth. And then you see, by 2, they oh my God, that's who they're going to be. And then 3 and 4, and they just develop this beautiful little personality. but you can see it almost straight away. And then it just develops into who we are today.
Yeah, I've got a few friends that are very young parents, and they're saying the same thing about the newborn baby. They'll be like, oh, feisty, or the other one is just happy and just chill. So it's really interesting to see the completely different, even though they're literally babies. So
and you'll hear, taking after dad or taking after mum, or that's like mum, but that's like dad. Yeah, or that's like Uncle Fred or whatever. Yeah, it is really interesting. So then we grow up into these 4 different personalities. Now I'm going to talk about 4 different personalities, but you have to remember that we are a bit of all of them. Nobody, I'm going to talk about these boxes or these categories or quadrants, but the fact is that we are a bit of everything. And more importantly, we can be anything we want to be. So although I'm going to talk about quadrants, it doesn't mean you're stuck in it. It just means that's basically what your preferences for life. So the first one's dominance, or a D, and the dominance people are just, they're the people that they want results, they're achievement orientated, they're fast, they're direct, sometimes they're a bit blunt. They're the type of people that I want it done now. No, I don't want it done now. I want it done yesterday. They're always on the go. Everything fast. They walk fast. They think fast. They talk fast. Everything's just fast. Then you've got the I, or the influencing type person. And the influencing type person is more big picture. They're visionary. They like dreaming. They're very influencing people. They love communication. They're very good talkers. They like negotiation. They just like anything that involves people and talking. Then you got the S, the high S people, which is steadiness. The steadiness people are loyal, harmonious, calm, emotional, feelings-based. If I just describe an S person, they're basically just a really nice person. Every S person are just a nice people because they just like to help people. They just like to be there.
Jay's like,
Thanks,
He did pay me to say that. And then you've got your C people, and that's conscientiousness. And conscientious people are just very detailed. They're analytical, detailed, factual. They like spreadsheets. They like all that kind of stuff that I don't like. Very accurate, very precise. Yeah, that type of person. And then but we've got a mixture of all of it. So nobody is just one of those 4. We are a bit of everything, but typically we're stronger on 2 and less strong on 2. So, for example, I'm a DI or an ID, and your top 2 can just fluctuate between the 2. So I'm a results-orientated person, an achievement-orientated person, but I like talking, and I like people, and I like big picture. So that's who I am. Now, I've got S as well. I'm also a very loving, emotional person. I love my kids. I love loyalty. I love stability. I've also C, so I do like a bit of detail. I try anyway. But I'm not as good at detail as a detail person. So when I'm looking at detail as an I can read the same thing that I've written and think there's no errors and there are. I just don't see them. But a high C person, which is the detail person, will see it straight away because that's who they are. Now a C person, which is more detail, even if they're not I, they can still be an I because they've got a little bit of I. So they can still be friendly and happy and enthusiastic and everything else, but they'll never be as visionary as an I, because an I is using a different part of their brain to the C person. So although we are a bit of everything, we are typically stronger on 2 and less strong on 2.
It was interesting when you did the session with the team. It was interesting listening to people talk about the fact that actually I do operate in a space that isn't my profile. And I think you might have asked a question like, how do you feel after that? Yeah. Something to that effect, that it's potentially more draining, like to actually spend that time, like someone who's an extreme introvert. Like there's famous examples of people that are, sort of extremely introverted, yet they seem to operate in a very overt and sort of positive manner to the world, but it's probably causing them, they're using a lot of mental energy to do so. Would that be fair?
Oh, absolutely. If we're doing the thing that really connects with our personality, it's really, really easy. But if we're doing something a little bit different, we can still do it, but it's a lot harder. Now, when I did the Burke-Britton session, I asked everybody to sign their signature with their non-preferred hand. So if they're right-handed, they had to do it with their left hand 3 times, and then they had to do it with their preferred hand. And everybody says, and you can try it at home now if you're listening to this and you've got a pen handy, sign your name 3 times with your non-preferred hand, and then do it with your right hand. what you'll feel is that doing it with your non-preferred hand, you can still do it, but you've actually got to think about it. And it's really, you've really got to put in the hard work to actually get your signature. But when you do it with your preferred hand, it's really easy. Now, that's the same with personality. If you're doing something that really connects with your personality, it's really, really easy because it's who you are. But if you're doing something opposite, you'll feel drained because you've got to think about it. You'll feel drained, you'll feel more tired, you won't do as good as job, and you won't enjoy it as much. So, yeah, people that are very high detailed and but introverted, yeah, they can do an extroverted's job and they can be really sociable and friendly and everything else. But when it's all finished, they'd like to sit and go, oh, wow, I'm exhausted. But you put a really sociable person into that role and they love it. At the end of the day, they feel buzzing.
What's your area, Amy, that you are exhausted in that's not in your wheelhouse?
Probably steadiness and slowing down and detail, taking time with detail. As much as I love spreadsheets and things like that, it's just not my forte. And I know that. And I have to sit, concentrate, spend time on it rather than quickly doing 10 other things in the same amount of time.
I think the interesting thing, having done the profiling with the team, and you mentioned earlier about that emotional intelligence, the actual awareness of your traits, like when it becomes evident, you kind of have a bit of an aha moment, and not only with yourself, but also in the people that you interact with. Because I was thinking in terms of the practical applications of profiling, one of the things that's been super valuable for us as a business is actually being able to look at a colleague and then look at their profile and know how they like to be communicated to or how they might communicate to you. And it certainly helps with those interactions inter-office, but it also, like the extension of that is also understanding or having some awareness about how that applies to clients and all the other people that you interact with in your daily life. I mean, it's the profiling is an extremely valuable tool in a professional's kit bag as well as individuals. It's just, I think it's a very, very helpful tool.
I think what you said as well was interesting. I think you mentioned is that you could re-profile years down the track and it would be similar. So we mentioned about working outside of your dominant areas, but you can't actually change that permanently. Is it you can change the percentage a little bit over years, or are you're set?
Research kind of suggests, no, we're pretty much who we are. And yeah, we can do, as I said earlier, we can do anything we want. So, but as I said, I'm not overly good at detail. Now, I could spend the next 10 years in a high-level accountancy job. I wouldn't like it, but I could give it a go. But after 10 years, I'm going to be no better at detail than I was when I started. But what you do learn, which is very important, is you learn coping strategies to make the best of what you've got. So, for example, I'm not overly good at detail. So I know that. So what I do is I make sure that if it's a really important document, I'll put it aside for 10 or 15 minutes before and reread it. Not straight away, but just let my brain kind of regather. I'll get someone to read it. Obviously use spell check and everything else, but I'm fully aware of it. And if it's really important, I'll make sure it's double checked by someone that is a high detail person. If I'm working, because I'm also a D, so I'm very fast paced and obviously I may be talking too fast for some of you. When I'm dealing with S's, which is the steadiness, harmonious, loyal people, I really need to slow down and provide more information to them because that's what they need in their operational world. So you not only learn how you are and also then put in some stopgaps to make sure that you do a better job at it, but you also become more aware of other people. So you adjust your behaviour to suit them. They, in turn, will change their behaviour to meet you halfway, and therefore you've got a more comfortable working, living relationship and more productive. Because if you're unaware of other people's strengths and weaknesses, what we tend to do is focus on their negatives. Oh, you got that wrong again. Oh, come on, you should smile more. Come on, do it quicker. Come on, stop talking so much. So we focus on all the negatives. But if you're aware of that's their strength, you turn their strength into a stronger strength, and then you help them where they're not so strong. And to be factual, you think about your relationship on who you're with at the moment. If you're in a relationship, typically your partner will be different to you, but the same. So your partner will have a slightly different personality to you, and the differences that they've got to you will be the strength of your relationship. They're giving you stuff that you can't do yourself, as well as them. And then you have a common bit and that's the really easy part of your relationship. And that's how relationships work, and that's how relationships work in the office. That's how relationship work with your clients. If you have a better understanding on how you're coming across and understanding who you are, understanding who your clients are and how they want to be treated, how they need information, how they want information, and you provide them with what they need, they will be better off. Your working relationship will be better off and your success will be higher.
So DIs and ISs, a DI couple, one's a DI and one's an IS with no to low C, they're going to struggle?
No, well, so they'll get on well. So we're talking about a DI. So quite often our partners are opposites, right? So you've got a DI,
Yep.
and you're married to an IS, or you're with an IS.
Yep.
So what you have in common is the I.
Yep.
So you're both very people-orientated, you're very enthusiastic, you're both visionary, you get excited about things, you talk a lot, you're very enthusiastic. What the D gives to the relationship is that drive. Let's do it. Let's take these dreams, let's make something of it. And then you got the S person saying, okay, well, that's great, but how are we going to do it? What are the things we need to do to make it happen? The D person gives the relationship the thinking, let's just go. The S person gives the feeling, saying, okay, that might be great, but how do we feel about it?
What if there's very low or no C?
Okay, where that works is that's when they use other people.
Okay.
So that's when quite often they'll use a financial advisor, they'll use an accountant, they'll have somewhat influential person in their life that they'll turn to make it happen. So the D and the S will talk and say, yeah, let's do this and this and this, and then they'll turn to the financial planner and say, how can we make it happen? Because they're not really interested in reading the financial reports. They're not really interested in all that data that comes through the system. They just want to know, at the end of the day, can we do it? In what time frame? And what do we need to do it to make it happen? Not the how.
I was just thinking about the submarine example. So what you mentioned that you'd profile people before they got stuck on a submarine for 6 months. What sort of combinations would you try and put? Would you try and put similar but opposites so that they balanced out, or would you try and do all the same sort of personalities on one submarine?
That's an interesting point, because people quite often say, and I work with a lot of organisations, and quite often the practice principal thinks they're doing a really good job. So they say, I want everybody like me, so let's hire he's more like me. Or they've got a really good financial advisor or planner, and they say, let's just get 10 more of them. It doesn't work. And it's the same with a submarine. The best mix for a financial planning practice or a submarine is a mixture of all four, because all four contribute to the final result. So, for example, if you put a whole bunch of high Ds, dominant people, on a submarine, they'd hate each other within a day because the Ds think that they're right all the time and they want to do it their own way. And they're quite stubborn and quite direct, so you've got nightmare. You put a whole bunch of Is on a submarine or in a practice, they have a hell of a lot of fun, but they're having too much fun to actually drive the submarine or actually do anything proper, or some of the financial planning practice. If you put a whole bunch of Cs on a submarine, yeah, they'll have tactical know-how, but they'll be going nowhere and they won't be able to. Or if you put a whole bunch of S's on a submarine or in a financial practice, yep, everybody's going to feel good because they're very, very caring and loving people. How are you feeling? No, I'm feeling good. You feeling good? Yeah, I'm feeling good. Okay, let's have a bit of a cry and then group hug.
Who's driving the submarine?
Yeah. So even in the sub, you've probably got the D as the commander. You've got the I people looking after the social part of and the communication sides and the PR side of the submarine. You got the C people looking after the technical side, and you got the S people actually doing the process work to make sure it all happens. So whether it's a submarine or a financial planning practice or anything, or family, you need a bit of everything.
Yeah. Again, that was one of the other, not so much a revelation, but recognition that we're pretty heavy S in the practice, which kind of makes sense given the genesis of Peter's business and the fact that we've been very, very relationship driven, which I think, as we've talked about at sort of a practice management level, your greatest strength can also be your greatest weakness. The fact that we're heavy relationship focused means maybe that some of the get up and go and drive of a D, someone who probably makes us all feel a little bit uncomfortable and makes us forces us to get out of our comfort zone and get busy, finding new clients, writing new business and thinking from that point of view. Yeah, it certainly has changed our thought process in terms of recruitment. I think in terms of practical applications of that DISC profiling, for me, it's been thinking consciously about the next people that we recruit. But Amy also made an addition to and I've told a few clients this, in terms of the profiling of our clients, so that someone can actually look at our clients now, if we've done a very basic assessment on them, and see what their preferences are. So if we've got an engineer, we know that he or she is probably going to want all of the detail. They're going to want to see all of the modelling. They're going to want to see the data, the calculations, as opposed to someone that is very visual and simply wants the highlight reel version of their advice. It's super helpful and helps, I think, from our point of view, deliver better advice and service to clients in the way that they actually receive it.
Yep. Yeah, the C people, the engineers, love the detail, and the I people certainly love just the big picture, the vision, the colour, the excitement, enthusiasm. All that detail, I'll leave it with the financial planner. That's what their job is for.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the D and S are completely different again. The D wants what is the result. The D wants the result first and then the detail later. They'll still want the detail, but they'll want to say, what is the result of where we've been? What's happening? I want to know now. And then the S person, yeah, the result's important. The result's important to everybody, but what they're more concerned about is the relationship that they have with you. And if they trust you and they trust what you're doing, yeah, the detail's important, but they're happy with the trust. So yeah, it's just funny how we're all different and what we want is different. Now that brings an interesting point. I talked earlier about your personal relationships with your partner. Well, when you think about financial planning, quite often you're seeing partners. So the partners typically, based on my research and what I've said, and hopefully everybody will be kind of saying, oh, that sounds right. You bring two partners in and they'll be different. So it's very, very, very important for the planner to be aware, and right from the reception to the planner to the CSO, to be aware that you're talking to different people. So you're providing information in a different way to do different people. So that's taken one more step. So you're satisfying both people in the relationship, usually not just one.
You'd see that a lot, wouldn't you?
You do, and it's interesting. You have to sort of adjust your cadence and the way you talk and the way you communicate and who you actually focus on when you're actually having the conversation, depending upon what you're talking about. But I feel like it's a skill. Like I feel that it's a skill, but I suppose you can probably tell us, Steve, about whether or not that skill is something that you can, like the ability to be able to interpret and read other people. And
that's what I was literally just about to ask. What would you say are the because when we did the Prova profiling, we went through a strongly agree, strongly disagree. We did a bunch of written answers, but how in a meeting or when meeting a person just on the street, how do you what are tactics that you use to profile someone in a way that allows for that better communication from your end to their end?
Yep. The first part is a better understanding of yourself. Again, it comes back to that, understanding who you are. By understanding who you are, you become more emotionally intelligent. If you practice the skills of trying to read people, and some people, as you said, some people are just natural at it. Some people are just really good. And some of the financial planners and reception CEOs are fantastic at that. That's who they are. Some people aren't quite as good, but you can learn it. So emotional intelligence can be learned. Emotional intelligence can be learned by first understanding and accepting who you are. And it's really just funny on that acceptance. Quite often when we do profiles and they read through their profile that I've given them, they're looking at me going, I'm not sure about this. And then I say, well, why don't you go home and show your kids or your significant other person.
That is so interesting, yeah.
And they'll go, yep, that's exactly like you.
I really want to get my whole family to do this. I think that would be so funny. And the communication within a household as well, seeing like the different things. But I think I've run into a few people where they're like, oh, that's not me at all. Yep. And you describe them like, no. And I'm like, are you sure about that? Are you sure? Yeah.
So on that point, the first thing is you have to accept who you are.
Mm.
And I know that I can come across as blunt, rude, dominant, aggressive, everything else. So I really work on that. So when I'm working with clients, I really taper that down and I really slow down for different people and more detail for others and be more friendly with others. Now, how to pick them in a very quickly is one, we've got an online program that Burke and Britton are using. But even that aside, you can start with their profession. So quite often we are attracted to certain professions based on our personalities. So most engineers, for example, are C for the detail, because they like the detail, and typically D because it's very structural and very thinking orientated. And then you think about marketing people are more I because they're more visual and more image, the big picture and vision. And then you think about some of the S occupations, which would be anything in the helping profession. Most nurses, teachers, most sports people, A lot of S, because there's a lot of feelings, a lot of helping people. Then you got the D type of personality. And the D personality, you're attracted to the more business owner, attorneys, top-level lawyers, solicitors, anybody where they can tell other people what to do. And so the first step is looking at the occupation. And from their occupation, you can usually guess a lot. And then quite often you'll see their partner, and their partner have a different occupation, which will then tell you that they're completely opposite personalities. Then when you finally see or have interaction with them, say through a phone call or an email, the Ds are really short, sharp, and blunt and to the point, typical D. The Is are really friendly, they're smiling more, they're happy, they're more communicative, they're typically an I. Then you got the S people. The S people, as I mentioned before, are just very nice people. They're usually quieter, they're more compassionate, they're more genuine, they're more sincere, they feel warmer. Then you got the C people, and they're a little bit more detached, they're a little bit more thoughtful, they're more thinking about process, and they want data. So very quickly, within, again, 4 minutes, right, as I mentioned right at the beginning, you can normally pick who they are and then work on that. But where it becomes important, that if you think you're not hitting the mark with them, reevaluate what you think of them and then readjust. Because that's where people get stuck. If they suddenly think that someone's an I and then they suddenly realise they're not, they've got to then adjust their responses to that person away from the I back to something else. Now, the majority of Australians that were born here and live in Australia are S's. So your first step is, most people are S's. So you kind of, if you don't know it all, you start with the S. So you start very warm, trusting, giving information, process orientated, and then you can drift from there. And then everything they do, DIC, everything from their phone calls, from their emails, from the way they talk, the way they at the office, the way they want information, you can really pick up the DISC.
So just on that, about Australians being S's, what's the reason for that? Is it because we've had consistent government, no conflict, there's trust in the community? What's the main reason for that, or is it?
It's pretty much S across the world.
Okay,
except some parts may not be so much S.
I was going to ask that. Do you have other examples of countries?
No, not much has come out of the Middle East and those other places.
Yeah.
No, but the majority of the world are S, followed by the I, followed by the D, followed by the C. And it kind of makes sense when you think about it that the most people you meet are pretty nice people. And in Australia, we're fairly communicative. That's the I. And then the Ds, well, the D are probably evolutionary, because imagine if there's just too many Ds in the world. Obviously, at some stage, they'd be, culled out a bit. Can't have too many of them. And then the Cs, yeah. And that's just the way it is.
Cindy, anything else you wanted to ask of Steve before we kind of wind this episode up?
Oh, that's a good question.
And no relationship advice.
Okay, well, that rules out all my questions then. I need all the help I can get.
Was there anything that surprised you about your profile? Because you don't mind, do you mind me sharing yours?
Yeah, absolutely. Go for it.
You're a heavy I. So you're our media and marketing guru, and your profile to me came out sort of spot on with the big picture, the grand picture of the vision of what you want. Was there anything that surprised you about your profile?
Honestly, no. My profile, I think I like to pride myself in being a somewhat self-aware person. Yeah. And my family-wise, my dad is a very direct, commanding person, and I follow a lot in suit of that. So when that came out, I was an ID. It was like, makes sense. My mum was also very creative. Okay. So I was like, there's my I. And then situationally, I've always just been go off, come up with your own ideas, and then action them. Yep. So that's just how I was brought up. So completely the four disc concept and me being those top two works perfectly for me. And then it also reflected all the weaknesses that got pointed out. I was like, yep, spot on. Can rush into things, likes to get stuff done quickly, which can lead to missteps or mistakes, need it done now, that sort of stuff. So it's brought forth in my mind to be more aware of stuff that like I can skip over, like the detail. I need to have someone check over my work. And I can also, when somebody is not that creative kind of go person, I can help that way. So it's really interesting that. And it's more the thing that I found interesting from the whole profiling was the other people. How can I communicate better with who I really struggle with? I've always found I was trying to look back and link it to people that I've really struggled to communicate with in the past. And they're all CS kind of people is where I've really struggled. So my only thing would be, so I'm an ID. How would you communicate better with a CS? What would I do being a direct
influencer? Again, they're opposite to you.
Yep.
So if you're dealing with an S, you need to slow down, provide more information, being an ID, you'll go fast forward on the smallest amount of information and make it up as you go. S people hate that. They want to know the processes. They want to know all the information before they're happy to make that decision. So you need to slow down, provide a lot more information, and make sure you provide enough detail for the detail people, because they may go along with your dream, but unless they can see the detail behind your dream, it just remains a dream to them. But you can't do that because that's really difficult. But what you can do is ask for their help. So that if you're dealing with somebody that's your complete opposite, talk about it. You know, for example, again, you and I are similar. So when I'm dealing with a high S person, I say to the S person, look, I'm really good at the big picture. I'm really good at getting you a result. But if I don't give you enough information, or if I'm talking too quickly, please slow me down and ask for more information.
Yeah, that open line of communication, inviting them into that space.
And then the important, and then with the detail people, if I'm not giving you enough detail, please let me know. Right, but then accept it. And then provide more information. Just don't scoff and say, oh yeah, whatever. It's important that if you invite them in the conversation, you then meet halfway.
It's interesting, when we interviewed for you for the position, one of the things that stood out to Amy and I.
This will be interesting.
No, but it's kind of it's reflected in your self-awareness of your trades, and I suppose reflective of your as a 19-year-old. You're still 19, 20. How old are you now?
I was 20.
20. Okay, sorry, I missed your birthday. Your level of emotional intelligence for your age and your maturity is something that is very appealing to us when we recruited you.
Thank you.
And so, again, having that aware, I was looking at mine thinking, shit, my emotional intelligence is terrible, because I was sure I was more D. I was sure that I sort of had more assertiveness than perhaps I did, and I was much more S than I actually thought. And I thought I was also more I. Like, I thought I had a sort of a greater, bigger picture worldview of ideas and creativity. But again, I think all of that self-awareness has been super helpful. Amy, was there anything that surprised you with yours?
Not really. I think I knew I was a D before I was told I was a D. One of the indications that I knew I was a D, and it would probably come out as that, is I used to say to new staff members, I will probably come across really blunt in emails and text messages and even in conversations. I don't mean it personally. I'm not doing it on purpose. It's just literally how I communicate, and I'll try and be a bit nicer. As I said, I'll throw smiley faces on emails.
I remember you, talking about how you'd be like, hope your weekend is well, at like the start of an email, because again, most of the population is an S. So they're after that more emotional connection, and probably being a D, you're like, so when's this happening? Can we book it in now? And you have to push yourself to go out of your way to be like, hope your weekend was well.
Yeah.
How's your dog, Sharon? Like,
to add that in. I actually go back and add it in, because I'll write the email out and read it and think that just sounds so blunt and terrible. Soften it with a little, a nice intro or a little bit of S. But I think you mentioned something as well before, Steve, where you said Ds will go into a meeting with wanting to know the answer already. And almost every meeting we have in this practice, I'll go in and I'll want to know the outcome in the first 5 minutes, and everyone else will still be talking about a Netflix show that they watched or a client situation, and I'll just be tapping my pen going, okay, but what are we doing? What's the outcome? So I do know I have to work hard to get out of my dominant D area.
You actually do a very good job of that now. Like, whenever Amy and I talk a lot about the business, and Amy knows that I like a bit of a preamble.
That's your S.
Yeah, that's my S. Like, I like a bit of a preamble, and Amy occasionally will cut me short and say, come on, yep, let's move it. But more often than not now, we'll sort of engage in the preamble and a little bit of conversation before then moving into the more dominant, let's get down to business. And I think, again, having that awareness of the people that you work with is why that is super helpful. The other thing that I thought I was surprised with, which was were lower on C, so your attention to detail, which I think was, as Steve mentioned before, you can do it, but it's exhausting. You gave me an example the other day where you said, I had a bunch of quite detailed work to do, and I thought, I can't do it today. I'm going to, you actually moved it and said, I need some time. I'm going to park it in a different spot, but actually had the awareness to say, it's not right for me now to do. I can do it, and you can do it very well, but you have to sort of build up to it, I suppose, and get the energy to do it.
It's interesting outward looking in, because you say that you're surprised that you weren't more D, and you said like you don't feel like you're as much of a C. I would think you're more of a C, and I would think you're more of a D, but I think it's because we said before you step out of your top two to fill in that position just because you have to, and it is part of like your job role and your profession. Like I would think you were a very detail oriented person from looking out, not knowing you very well. Like I'd be like, spreadsheets, go woman, yes. Like that's kind of what I get from face value. But like profiling in, if you just profile the earth like that, you'd actually have to take a step back a while into that relationship and go, hang on, something's not working here, and then change it. Same with you. It actually surprised me that you were more S, but then now getting to know you more and having that now, I'm like, yeah, you do like a preamble. There's that little part, maybe you have that more D attribute outward facing because you have to be. Yeah, because you are a business owner. That's what you've got to do. So, interesting.
Isn't
yeah.
it?
Yeah, it's so interesting. Again, it speaks to why the value in profiling. I'm mindful of time. If people are out there listening, Steve, whether they be sort of business owners or financial advisors or like who can use your services, how can they get in contact with you? How do they go about speaking to you if they wanted to?
Probably the easiest way to contact me is through our website, which is prova, prova.com.au, and all the information's there that you can contact me or one of the team, and we'll certainly get back to you. But who can use it? Everybody can use it. You know, whether it's the practice itself, looking at recruitment, looking at improving the processes within the team building, or even a practice wanting to know more about their clients. And we've been specialised in the wealth management industry now for in our 16th year, just specialising for wealth management. So we've got a fair bit of knowledge and history there that we can certainly help people with. Awesome.
We actually sent it on to some of our spouses and partners and family members as well, because that was the best part.
Yeah, par it off to your family members. That's always funny. I sat a couple of girls down at the pub and made them do it afterwards at my second job and was like, come on, guys, I want to see what you are. So that was good. Every
boyfriend and girlfriend my children have ever brought home, we've profiled them at the kitchen table on their first dinner with Dad. I've got a
way to scare them off.
Well, I did, and that was probably good for it. But they ended up all good. They're all happily married now, so that's all good.
All good. Well, Steve, mate, thanks again for everything you're doing for us and have done for us. We really appreciate it. It's been a great investment of our time and resource in broader team. We look forward to having you back on for another episode in the future if you're happy to come back. Cindy, Amy, thanks for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.
Okay, thank you.
Nice.
Okay.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook and Twitter at Burke Britton FP or Google Burke Britton Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PB Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britton Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.